Welcome everybody back to the Subliminal Show. Today I have the honor of sitting down with Bryan Jackson. Has a BA in Engineering Management and Intercultural Studies. He is currently working for a company called SonSet. Is it SonSet? SonSet. Okay. SonSet Solutions, and then you're doing over there various kind of technical work that kind of allows you to travel around the globe. Is there anything else that you do at SonSet that is?
Engineering management's a very broad area that I'm in, so I do a lot of different things. I recently just finally got a role nailed down, which was nice. I'm the SonSet radio coordinator and inventory coordinator. So SonSet radios they're radios we send to solar powered small little radios we send to different ministries, and so that's kind of I'm in charge of a lot of the different things we go through as we take it through the factory and everything. So just testing them and stuff like that. And then inventory, I'm kind of involved with just organizing things, getting everything organized well, and moving stuff around the shipping area and things like that. And then on top of that, I do story writing and then videography stuff too. So kind of, it's the way missions is. You just do all types of so.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've really got a wide variety of things that you do and things that you've got your hands in. So you have been a lot of places. We were talking a little bit beforehand, and you had listed off at least 4 different countries, and including Alaska. And both Bryan and I have been to Alaska. Fun fact: we actually were on that trip together, and so that was a lot of fun. But since then, you have been a lot of other places. So what are some other countries and places that you've been able to visit?
Yeah, so I went to Greece and Turkey. That was a trip with college. Kind of right when I graduated, I went to that trip. So that was an educational thing. We went around to different places in the Bible that around the Aegean Sea there. So that was very much kind of a touristy sort of thing, going to all the archaeological places. But it was very striking to see a lot of the culture there for sure. So especially going from Greece or from Turkey into Greece, because we were going from all around in Turkey, hearing the call to prayers from the mosques all the time, and then enter Greece, and it's like back to America almost. It's a very, very Americanized country there, so very interesting to see that stuff for sure. And then recently with SonSet, I've been doing some missions travel, so it's a little bit different than the tourist stuff. I've done a trip to Panama in April, and then like a couple days ago I got back from Tanzania, so that was very fresh, very recent.
Yeah, I know you talked a little bit about it before, but what kind of the practical things that you're doing with SonSet?
Yeah, so I actually just got my roles kind of nailed down. So the first one's the SonSet radio coordinator. So SonSet radios are these solar powered, battery powered radios that we send overseas so that they can be, they have an antenna as the lanyard, so they can be in these really, really isolated places and not need to be charged with a cord or anything. So those things we do manufacture a lot of productions of those things, so we send those out. So I'm in charge of a lot of the logistics of things, getting them tested and charged, and then we send them to have churches come in, and then they can test them and box them up for us. So that's really helpful to get them coming in too. There's also a lot of logistics with that, so there's a lot of management required with all that process. I've been getting my hands into all that stuff as well. And then the other area, the major area, is inventory. So I've been working with just right now, everything just kind of all over the place. So I've tried to get all the cardboard boxes in one spot and all this and that in one spot, labeled with inventory labels and things. So that's making it a little bit more helpful but it's also a big project because it's.
What are some of those things that you've learned by traveling to other countries?
Okay, well, yeah, I've definitely learned. It's been very striking, especially I guess both in Panama and Tanzania, seeing how people live with so much less than we have here. It's not often, sometimes I'm just like, oh man, I don't have that much, but in comparison with what they have, it's just, there's no comparison. It's just crazy how they live, and often they just have so much joy, even in just being there with their shack and their animal, and then that's about what they got. So it's very, very crazy, and that's been something that was really humbling to go there and see them just living life just the way they've always known how to. And then also just seeing the hardship that sometimes they endure as well. There was, especially in Panama, that was a kind of a central hub for refugees coming from Venezuela. They kind of go through Panama to try to get up to America. So that was something we were really struck with. We didn't see a lot of them, but there was definitely the people we were staying with was like, yep, they come through all the time, and we were right around the Darien Gap, which is where there's no roads and it's just jungle, and there's a lot of robbers in there. But people refugees from South America come up and they feel like my life's it's so bad here that I'm willing to risk the jungle and the robbers to get up. So that was just something really, really humbling that, they're going through all this journey to try to get to America, and then I have a flight in a week to get back. So it's definitely a very, very humbling in a lot of ways, for sure.
Yeah.
And also, I guess some things I've learned in other countries was a little bit of the language, and the language gap was pretty interesting. In Panama was Spanish, so that was cool to see how some of my high school Spanish came back to me. And when you're immersed in the culture, you got to speak it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Is there anything that you've kind of learned about yourself in specific?
Well, I definitely learned how highly I value that comfort. And I mean, I've kind of thought about that before, but you don't really know how much you value that until you're just placed in this completely uncomfortable situation. And one example I can think of in Tanzania, we were going around to these churches and installing this equipment, and then we got to this, like, we finished our equipment a week in, and we had a week left, and we're like, all right, what are we doing now? And then the guy we were with was like, all right, here, you're going to teach this English class. And I was like, oh, you're also going to speak at this graduation. And it was just like, what? We had one day to think about that and plan for those things. And that's just the way that their culture is, just very spontaneous. And I'm very much a planner, and I feel very comfortable once I have my everything planned out and all the layout. But I just had to go for it because they just stuck me in the class in front of the kids, and then he said, all right, go. And then he walked away. So it was like, very much, but yeah, that was very, now looking back, I'm really thankful for it because it was cool to see, kind of be in that uncomfortable spot and, learn about myself. Oh, I can actually do this. And I don't necessarily need to always be comfortable. I can, step into some of these difficult situations, but in the moment it was not fun.
Sometimes it takes going thousands of miles away to realize, what was, that cliche phrase of what was inside us all along. That cliche, like, oh yeah, I guess I do. This is part of who I am and what I really like to do. And I think as you'd probably agree with as well, of like, you don't necessarily need to travel thousands of miles away to figure those things out. And there's other ways to do it. But yeah, I think both are equally as valuable. Wrapping up that conversation, it sounds like you've had an incredible opportunity just to learn a lot, be able to adapt this, really what we've talked a lot about on the show, of this attitude of being willing to listen and learn in a non-judgmental and a way that's willing to just sit and listen to people. And so I think that's really cool of the embodiment of what the goal of this show is. And so I'm really, really excited for you and what other trips you're going to be able to go on and experience. So, and we briefly talked about it when we first started, but this idea of living a fulfilling life. So if you could just start us off, like, what do you mean by that? What does it mean to live a fulfilling life?
Yeah, so I think, one thing I feel like people often say is just, always try to be happy. That's the, how you can kind of be fulfilled. And I really have come to see that really doesn't work very well, because happiness is an emotion that comes and goes, and circumstances just, it's so easy for that to just change. And so that type of thing is, I'm always cautious when I hear that, because just like, you can't get it. I tried that, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely been a good but also difficult learning experience to learn that. And then optimism is a good thing. I've learned to have optimism, and mainly by just being thankful for things. That's like, I feel like that's a good, effective route to kind of live more of a satisfying life of being able to see, oh man, there's all this stuff that's bad maybe, but wow, look at this thing that I have here. And maybe I've seen it going to Panama and then coming back and being like, wow, look at all this stuff I have. So it's like, it makes it a little hard to be negative and pessimistic in the dumps when just like, you just are thankful for all the things that you have and the relationships and the this and that. And just, that's definitely been a big boost to my living with fulfillment of just seeing all the things that are here. So yeah, that's been, one big aspect there. But then probably more broadly with living a fulfilling life would be just having my identity placed in something that is solid, because that's graduating college is a time where you're just trying to figure out what your identity is. And I've definitely put it in some places that, I really wasn't living fulfilled because it was just, nothing seemed to be working, and I think it just kept kind of falling apart, and I was like, oh man, what's going on? So that's where I've really dug into my faith since graduating, because that's something that's I've found to be very solid and very, something I can rely on. And that's really helped me to live that fulfilling life, to have something like that that's, bigger than myself. And I kind of initially had gotten that idea from a mentor of mine who just was very influential kind of in my development, and just his infectious joy. And he was just so fulfilled. And like, he was, he was a coach in a 5-star program. So he was just kind of a mentor there, and was just able to pour into my life, and, such selflessness, and, wanting to help me out, and always positive, and just delighting in all the things he did. And I was like, man, that is what I want there. And I could see that he wasn't trying to seek all these things for himself. He was very giving, very generous, and it kind of helped me kind of figure out a little bit of, where that fulfilling life idea comes in.
Can you provide any insight on, like, how does one live a life that is fulfilled?
Yeah, so I think, the one idea I mentioned earlier was the idea of living for something greater than yourself. So that's, whatever that looks like, whether that's, living, for me, that's living for faith, but, there's other aspects for me also that's something greater than myself, like being in missions and just living to, going to these trips to help people. Like, I'm not, going to these uncomfortable places just for the fun of it. It's really, to be brutally honest, it's not fun at all. For most, but that's not the be all end all for me to just have a good time. That's what I've really been finding. It's like, it's not about trying to get all this stuff for me, but it's, that's where kind of the focus for serving others and stuff like I saw with my mentor, where that was really, that's where he got his satisfaction. A lot of it was serving these people and being involved with this mission to these kids that he was ministering to, and all these opportunities to kind of do something that was bigger than himself. So that's definitely a huge area that fulfillment comes, kind of seeking something bigger like that. And just the building relationships with people, that's another, it's an area where a lot of that can come in, because if you're just, when there's times that you're just completely by yourself for a period of time, it can get pretty isolated, and life doesn't seem quite right. And that's kind of, we need to be with people. So that's one of those areas that's something that our souls long for. So it's why that's a fulfilling thing, to hang out with friends, or to see these mentors that you haven't seen in a long time, that kind of thing. So that's definitely a big area of doing that. And I guess another related to all that, an area of fulfillment, just getting out of my comfort zone, which is kind of ironic. It definitely doesn't feel that way at the time, but then afterwards, it's just, I felt very fulfilled, being like, wow, I did that. That was something that was very, very uncomfortable, but it's not something that, you really want to do sometimes, but to do it is just like, wow, that's cool. That's fulfilling. So I would say in general, fulfilling has been people, building relationships has been my faith, and being able to talk to people and to share that transformation that I've experienced, and then just getting out of my comfort zone as well.
Those are some really cool different avenues that you've mentioned, and I think each of them, of course, have a very strong validity to them. Obviously, I'm personally biased to relationships and people and just how important they are in our life as an avenue to kind of feel fulfilled. But yeah, I really like that insight. So thank you for sharing that. We've kind of already talked about this, but are there any kind of tips that you've got to live a life that's considered fulfilled?
Yeah, I do have a few. Yeah, so I guess the first one would be a little bit poking, but just get out of yourself, because that's something like I feel like our culture really kind of nails home. Just focus on yourself, just very individualistic, and make yourself wealthy, get all the stuff you can, and just that's very pervasive, and all these advertisements come at us and tell us that, but it really sets us up for failure to put us in this box where we're by ourselves without people and just surrounded by all our stuff that doesn't actually fulfill us, and just that's not the way we want to live. So I'd say just get out of yourself and serve people, develop relationships, and that's a really big part of living that fulfilled life is just not making it all about you. Yeah. And so it's one of the number one big ones, I think. And then also just practicing gratitude, for sure. I was mentioning that earlier, has something that really helped me see life a little bit more positively, is seeing all the things that I have, and optimism really thrives when gratitude is present. So that's something that pessimism is very easy to do, and
yeah. Yep.
There's not a good way to fight that without having some gratitude for what you have. So that's definitely a pretty practical thing I would recommend. And then another thing that's been really helpful for me has been solitude, especially in nature. Just for one, kind of a spiritual practice for me, but even just in general, just slowing down and getting out of the busyness of life. That's been another thing I've seen in my travels too, of seeing how they're very not hurried a lot of the time, and their church services last 3 hours, and they're not in a rush to get from one thing to the next. In one way it's kind of uncomfortable, but another way it's kind of refreshing, because it's like, okay, I don't have to regulate my schedule every minute for this time. It's just kind of in Tanzania we had like, all right, here you go, you just have 3 hours, just do whatever. They just didn't have anything planned for us, and it was actually really nice, and I was almost had too much free time. But it's definitely something that in other times where I've had solitude, it's been really, really refreshing to just take a break, take a breath, and then kind of come back refreshed. So that's I think an avenue to kind of unload some of the stuff that's making life unfulfilled, to kind of go back and have a fresh perspective.
I really like that idea of having that space to slow down. Something that was brought up to me, and I'm forgetting who did it, and if that person that's mentioned this to me, I apologize that I can't remember and I can't quote you. But they were talking about how, like, we as a Western culture have kind of more American has kind of abandoned this idea of like inviting people over for tea, or just having that period of rest in the afternoon. And I think that's a valuable practice of slowing down, of having those spaces that we can exist in to genuinely, either it's have a conversation and listen over, a nice warm cup of tea, or just having those rest times to be by ourselves and recenter and refocus just who we are. Thank you, Bryan, for being willing to come on and talk and answer my questions, just engage in this conversation with me. I do really appreciate how you've you really have been the embodiment of what I want this show to do, and be able to just, listen to other people and hear their stories and hear about, what makes them thrive, what makes them feel fulfilled, as we talked about. But yeah, thank you guys for listening, watching, whatever platform that you find us on. For those of you who are listening, we're on YouTube. For those of you who are watching, we're on pretty much every podcast network out there. We've got Facebook, we've got Instagram. Thanks guys for watching, and we'll see you. I think we'll see you next week, if not the week after. We'll eventually see you. We'll come back, I promise.